as we sit smack dab in the middle of another smoky wildfire season. Today on CityCast Portland, we're sharing a conversation from earlier this year about the surprising fact that our city has some of the worst air quality in the nation year-round. Mary Pivoto, executive director at Neighbors for Clean Air, has been advocating for better air quality in our city for over a decade. She spoke to us about why our air is so bad and what we can do about it. It's Monday, July 24th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Mary, thanks so much for joining us. Before we jump in, I wanted to ask you, what got you into clean air advocacy?
So it is kind of crazy story. I was a mom, 3 kids, and I was looking online for the farm to school lunch program that was at Portland Public Schools. And as things happen, instead, what came up was industrial air pollution in America's schools. 178,000 schools across the country they had actually put into their database. And up came this picture of the ranking of my children's Northwest Portland school, Chapman Elementary, as being among the worst 2% in the country for exposure to industrial air pollution. And I was floored, honestly. It wasn't what I was looking for that day. I hadn't thought, boy, I need a new career. I just saw something that really shocked me. And I shared it with friends. I shared it with other parents at the school. And we started organizing to figure out why.
Yeah, usually when people think of the Chapman School, they think of those sparrows that go down the chimney. They're not really thinking like, oh, this is a terrible place for kids to breathe and exist in. That's not... because we all have this idea that Portland, green trees, we have good air. But why is the air so bad here? We live in a valley, right? And so somehow the shape of the valley is lending itself to us having terrible air. And that's so annoying because we can't change that.
Right, which isn't that different from a lot of the places, especially in the United States, that have some of the worst air. A lot of them have to do with those basins, if you will, mountain ranges and valleys that create the pockets where the air pollution, where the human activity will create air pollution, and then it'll sit in those places. So Portland does have that. We have our West Hills and our valley, and we have wind patterns that prevail, that push where the industrial and air pollutant creation, pushes it into our city and kind of makes it sit there. But we also have, air pollution is a bit of a blind spot when you're considering air toxics. Portland at the time when I saw was very proud of the fact that, for example, carbon emissions had been on a decline, even as, our population was growing and activity was growing. And so what I realized, though, was that Portland, that considered itself so progressive on carbon emissions, for example, was really bad or just a blind spot on other emissions. And so carbon and greenhouse gas is one pollutant, but the host of pollutants that I discovered in my neighborhood are associated with industrial activity are called hazardous air pollutants. They're a whole different classification, and they aren't really well captured when we monitor the air to meet federal standards. For example, there are only 6 pollutants that have federal standards. And yeah, Portland's pretty good on those, and we've seen some declines. But industry, who's emitting 600 plus other pollutants that can cause cancer, we actually have no enforceable limits for those.
That seems so backwards.
It does.
Because it's directly affecting us.
Health, exactly.
Yeah, our health. Yeah.
And so it is kind of backwards. And the better we get at, all of us, either trying to drive less or drive lower emitting cars, the bigger proportionately the problems of these other engines are. So, for example, you and I have to take our car to the Department of Environmental Quality testing site in order to register it.
Right.
But big trucks or trains or all the construction equipment or ships. Those actually aren't controlled at all as well. These trucks that emit diesel pollution, that is 80% of the pollution that we breathe and the particulate matter that we breathe and the carbon and greenhouse gases, they don't have tests. They don't
In Oregon?
they no really almost nowhere. California is the only state in the nation that has set its own standards, and it's allowed to by the federal government allows it to be
Aggressive
more
than the
aggressive than
federal?
federal.
Gotcha.
And so California has done that and used that authority that it has to address diesel engines, and it has set really strict standards for all, pretty much across every sector of diesel, whether it's the big trucks or the equipment, also all the construction equipment as well. And Washington State does not have any stricter regulations than the federal government, has, but it has invested a lot more money of its own general funds. And so Oregon was really caught in the middle between these two states that were being more aggressive. We're identifying the problem with diesel and being more aggressive to try and phase it out. And so what was happening in Oregon is we were basically becoming the dumping ground of those two states. So even though, because we didn't have either, we weren't doing either regulations or really coming up with more money and focused efforts to clean up the old diesel engines. And so we became, a sort of a bargain area for like buying old engines, businesses in Oregon, because we weren't doing anything to get rid of them.
Yeah, so basically vendors from California and Washington were just like, "Oregon will buy these."
Exactly.
Yeah.
The saddest story, the saddest example of that I remember hearing about was a school bus company. So that, operated school buses in California and Oregon and actually delivered buses up to Oregon and had them take the diesel particulate filters off.
What?
They had to, they needed them to put them on the ones that were operating in California.
Oh my
When
god.
we understand diesel particulate in a school bus is the worst of the worst, because not only is it bad emissions, but the emissions inside the school bus then are like 4 times higher. And there was a study in Washington State done around cleaning up school buses and showed that when they cleaned up the school buses, there was less asthma and there was lower rates of absenteeism. So again, I have to, take a win. 2019, we did set some registration standards. Those are just taking effect on the oldest of the old. For medium heavy duty trucks cannot register the oldest of the old anymore. And it will slowly phase them out. It is not quick enough, and we're still lagging, but at least we put a stake in the ground somewhere against this big problem. But
Yeah.
there's so much more work to do around diesel particulate pollution.
Do you think that a lot of it is because our industry of logging and farming and construction has been so strong historically?
Well, I mean, I will say many representatives coming from logging and those industries are some of the strongest voices against changing anything.
Yeah.
And so it is frustrating. And what's interesting, especially around a lot of these diesel regulations that would clean up construction equipment, for example, mostly agricultural and logging is all exempt from that. We're just trying to clean up the pollution where the people are. This is an environmental justice issue. This pollution is 4 times higher where there are higher concentrations of Black and brown people. And those are in our cities. That is due to transportation infrastructure. It's where we put our freeways. It's where we put, our historically redlined people to live and then put their schools there. And so, we've been working a lot over the years with students at Harriet Tubman School, and, they're right on top of that freeway. And that freeway, that is not just a new problem today. That freeway was put into the Black community there. So this has been a really big environmental justice issue that I think has been a blind spot in Oregon across not just the traditional opposition, but I even think among our folks, the environmental movement in Oregon was really so focused on all the natural beauty of our region, which, is not wrong, but they really have not been focused on people and the environmental injustices that our built environment has caused.
But You brought up diesel engines, and I want to go back because I feel like that's such a workable piece. So I know that there's a lot of talk about electric trucks, basically just, oh, we should all just go electric. Like, and I know that you have a counterpoint to that, and I really want to get to that because I feel like it's important to sort of differentiate the larger steps and the baby steps we can take to get somewhere. Could you explain why, if let's say the state was just like, you know what, guys, we're going electric. We're figure it out. We'll give you some money, but ultimately you have to do this. What would be your response to that?
Thank you for that question. My answers probably aren't always satisfying to everybody, but my issue, so you're right. I mean, electrification is really important, I think, to our long-term strategy to deal with the changing climate and the power that electrification can help, you know, get us to zero emissions. Um, the problem with diesel engines is that electrification, we know that electrification is in the short run more expensive. So if you aggregate, electrification, over the lifetime of a 30-year engine, the numbers come out pretty well, but it takes a huge upfront cost.
Right.
So there's that one problem. And so for a lot of the people who are continuing to operate some of the older and most emitting diesel engines, that upfront capital just isn't, that's a huge expense to them. If you decide to take the money that we have and say, okay, I could buy an electric truck, or I could make sure that school district has an electric bus, you would end up with one electric truck at the cost of what could be, 8 or 9 new diesel trucks.
Right. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, how 2 clean air bills up for review have fared this legislative session. I just want to move us over to the 2 bills in this legislative session that were written to help regulate diesel emissions, exactly what we're discussing, but neither of them made it past the legislative deadlines last month. So, I mean, I'm assuming the push was again from these industries, that, these logging industries or whatever. But like, do you know any of the background of why they did not move forward? Like, because it seems like this was what we needed.
Yes. I'm really frustrated that they didn't move forward. And yes, I think there is some standard opposition that is part of the problem in Oregon. But honestly, I really believe it's the conviction of the people that we really look to and believe in that need to be more aggressive on this and recognizing this. I think that there is a massive movement globally that we need to catch up to in Oregon, which is to prioritize the saving of people's lives from what is globally the number one killer of people on the planet is air pollution. And that has a study that was analysis done out of University of Chicago using World Health Organization data that shows that, breathing polluted air kills more people than, war or pandemic, even smoking. But if you do policy that prioritizes saving people's lives today, then you would be doing policy that maximize air pollution reductions immediately and urgently. And Oregon isn't there yet. And our leadership and our environmental community isn't there yet to prioritize saving people's lives. And so we are using political capital and making choices to prioritize policy that reduces carbon and greenhouse gas and climate, while there seems to be a trade-off to not do the policy that would save people's lives today. I plan to change that.
Right. People were speaking out against the bill. I think a lot of the reasoning was that too many people rely on diesel, and I'm just not understanding, like, what can we do about it? Those who are listening, those who are maybe feeling a little fire in their belly right now, like, what would you suggest for the public if they want to do something, help out, figure out how to make sure these bills don't get rejected again?
Well, thank you. Obviously, one of the things that we could really use help of is, come to our website, neighborsforcleanair.org, and please sign up to join the effort and join the work to clean it up. And we will help you be involved. But you need to talk to your state representatives. You can Google "find my legislator" in Oregon, and you can find out who represents you in Salem. Those people are crucial to our work. We need people who better understand this. And better have a better understanding of that it's important to the people they represent. So those things are very important, but please do join our effort. And we are coming back strong and hard. And we actually were speaking with folks a lot during this legislative session before that deadline. And they were talking about making some compromises in these bills that we said, no, we don't want to compromise. It's been too long.
Mhm.
This has been lagging. And so we would rather work with folks to make the bills stronger.
Well, thank you so much, Mary, for taking the time to speak with us and, yeah, let us in on all that's going on. And thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated this conversation today.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.